Joining me now is Charlie Angus, the NDP Member of Parliament who for the last 15 years has been representing the people of Kashechewan. Charlie Angus, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Just to start out, what can you give us the latest on the situation right now with regards to the evacuation?
The evacuations from Kashechewan began this morning. Flights are taking people, about 550 will be flying to Timmins, 550 to Kapuskasing. Then the other groups will be separated to Cornwall and then over to Thunder Bay. So people are going to be very, very dispersed, far away from each other.
Okay, let's as the MP, we have to talk about how we got to where we are today. A lot of us have been watching, none more than you, been watching the fate of Kashechewan over the years. A lot of us were under the impression that a relocation was moving ahead. Why are we seeing another year and another evacuation?
Well, this year I find the community is very frustrated. The people of Kashechewan are so amazingly patient, but they've seen broken promise after broken promise, going back to the original agreement that we signed with the Paul Martin government in 2005 to begin moving to high ground, a deal that was broken by the Harper government, and then Jim Prentice signed a new agreement saying that they would fix the community on the present floodplain and everything would be fine. Well, those promises were broken as well. And then in 2017, we were there when the government of Justin Trudeau signed an agreement to begin the move. And it felt like this time it was going to happen. We had met with Minister Philpott last fall. There was, intense pressure, especially from the young people who just don't want to continue going through this. But we were all told to wait and see the budget, and we saw the budget, and there's nothing there. So once again, the community's at risk. Once again, they don't know what they're going to come home to, and once again, there could be catastrophic flooding in this region that we've seen really bad flooding many times over the last 15 years.
Now, Indigenous Services Minister, the new Indigenous Services Minister, Seamus O'Regan, said last week in Parliament, he was questioned, he said they're working on it. They're moving as fast as they can. There's negotiations, there's complications. They have to buy the land. They have to build a new access road. So how close do you think this community might be?
I don't think we are even in the game right now. We've gone through these games with government before where they say, oh, it's complicated. Well, it's complicated to move a community, but you have to show goodwill, and you actually have to put a budget in place. You can't move a community by just saying nice things and signing agreements. So that was what we were waiting on. We were waiting to see what was in the budget to begin doing this right, building that road, making sure that we check out the new town site, and then start to make a coherent plan. This is not something that would be done overnight. It was never going to be sold that way. It was that this community would be involved in building maybe 50 units a year where people were getting trained up. But that's all dependent on actually having a budget. And clearly, Bill Morneau thought there was better priorities for the Liberal government than helping Kashechewan. So we're stuck with another broken promise and, an entire community dislocated for one more year, and a lot of frustration and also, I think, trauma in the community. These are really, really emotionally trying events for the community to have to go through every single year.
Okay, I want to get to that in a second, but I just want to ask you, so if they haven't even bought the land yet, how far away, and there's no budget allocation for it, how far away might we be before they could even start on the project?
Well, I think you always got to look, when government doesn't want to do stuff, they'll find jurisdictional problems. I mean, for 15 years, we've had the same location. It's called Site 5. Everybody knows where it is. If they haven't got around to talking to the province with it yet, well, there's some real problems within the Department of Indigenous Services. Yeah. Nobody else lives up there, only the Cree. This is something that's pretty doable. The only thing holding it back again and again is the political will from government and the willingness to actually put some dollars on the table.
Okay, speaking of dollars, I want to ask you a question because I know some of the local, the chief up there and some of the local councillors have been quoted. How much is it costing year after year as well to airlift people to, this time, to 4 communities, some of them as far away as Cornwall and Thunder Bay?
Well, I think if you look at what the government spent since breaking the agreement in 2005, they probably spent over $100 million on the evacuations, on flood damage, on trying to repair the dike wall to keep them safe, which now the engineering reports show that that dike wall doesn't. It's basically a big dirt berm against the Albany River. It doesn't meet any of the safety standards, and the engineers quote it as their quote is that this is a community at, quote, intolerable risks. That's why you can't leave them there to roll the dice. They have to be flown out once the water starts to flow, because one year that dike wall is going to give way and there's going to be a catastrophe. And then everyone's going to say to government, why didn't you deal with this before? And that's what we've been hoping to avoid, is let's start being proactive rather than wait for the catastrophe.
I mentioned, just a last question, I mentioned that it's been 15 years you've been representing this community as MP. You've seen a lot of evacuations, repeated evacuations, and you talked about the trauma of being evacuated to cities all across Ontario. How long do these evacuations last, and what kind of disruption does it cause on people's lives?
Well, we've seen enormous disruptions. The flood of 2006 was a catastrophe for the community. It destroyed so much. Then in 2013-14, there was another catastrophic flood that damaged many of the homes. We had people who were unable to go home for over 2 years, who were living in apartments far from their homes. So it has an effect on the mental health of families. It has effect on the elders. You know, people who are sick can't be with their loved ones, get separated, people who die off because, I think, of the stress, and then an enormous impact on the young people who are losing upwards of a month of schooling every time this happens. So certainly when I talk with the young people, they're tired of this. They want a safe community. They're entitled to a safe community, and that's my call to the Prime Minister. How is it possible in 2019 that this is still going on?
Are we ever going to see any action on this? Any forward, definitive action on this before, say, the next election?
Well, I think this is certainly going to be a question that Mr. Trudeau needs to answer to Canadians. He made promises. He's made a number of promises to First Nations. Kashechewan, you know, is a septic wound that the government keeps saying, well, we'll put a few more Band-Aids on. Canadians get it. They know how unsustainable this is. What we don't want to have is we don't want to have a catastrophe, and this could be a catastrophic year for flooding. So I really think the Prime Minister needs to do the right thing and direct Bill Morneau to not just look after people like Galen Weston, but actually make sure the people in Kashechewan have the funding necessary to begin planning a proper community where they can be safe and their children can have a better future. Last
question. I always say it's the last question, but one just came into my mind. How on God's earth did people get located on a floodplain?
Well, this is the incredible wisdom of Indian affairs. I mean, the Cree didn't survive 6,000 years up in the James Bay lowlands by doing something as dumb as living on a floodplain. It was the government that moved them there. The government told them that that would be the best place to deliver services. The elders at the time knew it was a floodplain, and we've been in trouble ever since, because that's where the government said the people had to live. That's where the government put the stores and the basic services. And until we get people to high ground, they're going to continue to live with the mistakes that the Indian Affairs Department has made year after year towards the people of Kashechewan.
Okay, Charlie Angus, thank you very much for speaking with us. Thanks for giving us a picture. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.